In honor of Alex Trebek, what is your favorite Jeopardy moment or memory? There was an American football category, and all three contestants did not answer a single question from the category. Alex slowly made fun of them more and more as the category went deeper. It's an all-time classic. I don't remember what tournament or who provided the final Jeopardy answer, but the guy was going to lose, so his answer was something like "We love you, Alex." Alex choked up. It was honestly very touching and unexpected. This farming tool also shares the slang term for an immoral pleasure seeker. Ken Jennings, what is a hoe? Trebek gave his version of Steve Harvey that day. It was the wrong answer, but was too perfect. For me, it was the consistency of seeing Trebek every weeknight for the last 20 years. I can't imagine another host of the show. I loved the Tournament of Champions they had. The questions were ridiculously hard, and yet all three knew nearly every one. The players were all down to earth in spite of their obvious intelligence, and Alex joining in the banter. A lot of fun. My favorite Jeopardy moment just happened 5 minutes ago. My dad's chosen joke answer to questions on the show has been the Basque region for years. I have no idea why. He says it anytime he doesn't know the real answer. Tonight we watched Friday's episode, and Basque was actually an answer. My dad knew it before the contestant answered, and completely flipped out when he was right. I know this is kind of stupid, but the fact that it was the last episode to air before Trebek's death was especially special. It kind of felt like a little joke between him and us. My grandparents watched Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune every night with dinner. If any of us grandkids joined them, there were rules. If you knew the Jeopardy answer, you could shout it out immediately. If you knew the Wheel of Fortune answer, you had to keep silent until everyone had solved it. I have such fond memories of watching Jeopardy with them and getting the approving nod from my grandpa when I'd know an answer no one else did. Thank you, Alex, for all the memories. Went to a taping session for Jeopardy and sat in the audience. So I watched it live, but it would not air until a month and a half later. Trebek, during breaks, would talk to people in the audience and answer questions. He asked specifically where people were coming from. My family said Idaho, and he said I love Idaho potatoes, and just chatted with us. That was cool to see and much appreciated. During the GOAT tournament, when Brad had a 0 from the previous match, they wiped the score, and James quipped, "Hey, Brad's score is still up there." High school teacher here. Jeopardy gave me a great memory with one of my favorite students. I was watching an episode one night and Alex read a question about Brave New World, the novel I was teaching at the time. I was pleased to see that trivia pop up, but didn't think much of it until the next day. The kid in question was the quarterback of our high school, super popular and one of the sweetest kids ever. The next morning he rushed into class excitedly to ask me if I had seen Jeopardy the night before and noticed the BMW question. I totally got it right, missus. I made the question part of our morning review and he and I shared a wonderful moment of mutual nerdiness. Thanks, Alex. There was a question asking about a character whose catchphrase was "I'm a victim of circumstance," and Alex read it in an attempted impression of one of the Three Stooges, but the woman who burst in said, "Who is Elmer Fudd?" And Alex, in a somewhat defeated tone, replied, "Was it really that bad? I don't know how many years ago it was that I saw that episode, but it still makes me smirk when I think about it." Not really a Jeopardy moment, but definitely a good Alex Trebek moment. That time Alex Trebek chased a burglar out of his hotel room in the middle of the night, and his Achilles tendon ruptured during the chase. Then realized he didn't have a key to get back into his room because he sleeps naked. Epic levels of awesome. Once the answer was something like the number 14, and sometimes 12. The guy said, "What is the age of consent?" My god, Trebek's face. Priceless. Ugh, this is going to be poorly paraphrased, because I can't remember the exact question, and can't seem to find the clip anywhere. But the question was about a sea creature and the answer was more a eel. When the contestant answered the question, he actually sang out, "That's Sam or Aladdin Martin," while the audience died laughing. Alex Trebek just kind of stared in the things I have to put up with way. He stared so long that the contestant eventually was like, oh, I mean, what is a moray eel? Back in the 80s, when I was in college, I spent one morning on the couch, sick. I watched Jeopardy, that morning among other shows of course. That afternoon my roommate's parents came over to visit him. Jeopardy is a syndicated show, so another channel was airing the exact same episode. Sick, wrapped up in a blanket, and eating the soup his mom made, I proceeded to amaze them with my obscure knowledge of practically everything. His dad was pretty impressed. From that point on I was the good influence in his life. Alex Trebek hosted the Canadian TV game show Reach for the Top. It was a high school trivia show that led to schools in Canada having reach leagues and competing against other schools. Growing up I was always the worst player on any sports team, an automatic out in softball, a bench warmer in football, and dead last in track. I was a terrible student at the same time. I never tried at anything but scored very highly on any test. Solid C+ student, and really thought that was just fine. My family did not have the money to send me to university, and I had no interest in going into student debt. Pretty much on track to be a burnout delinquent with the smarts to do some damage to society. Then I saw an episode of Jeopardy at age 13. I was getting most of the questions and my mother mentioned that there was a team at my high school that was pretty much Jeopardy, but on a team. It was early morning practices, so I wanted to write it off. But after watching a few more episodes of Jeopardy and getting more than anyone else in my family, I gave it a shot. The Reach team was filled with A+ students, Asian kids with strict Asian parents who followed all the meme dictates. Fat slovenly sleepy pasty kid walks in there and says, hey, I think I want to join the team. Went forward to do extremely well. The Glee kids were right. Winning regionals is a big deal. Won regionals, then sectionals. Took it all the way to the provincial championship to come in second. I started working a little harder in school, went to a college, then went to a university, then got a non-profit job influencing green building policy in one of Canada's largest cities, then even helped influence the national building code for the better. I was going to be a skid, a drain on society, the worst type of criminal that would have figured out systems to do terrible damage. Alex Trebek made me a scientist. In the UK here, we don't get the show on TV, and when the wife and I visited the US for our honeymoon and subsequent trips, it was always on during that period when we were getting ready to go out for the night, so we'd end up watching it and loved the format. A couple of years ago they added a ton of episodes to UK Netflix, and I spent my 40th birthday in a holiday cabin near the coast watching back-to-back shows while downing a bottle of scotch. I have several all related to my appearances: College Jeopardy! 02, Talk 03, Ultimate Talk in 2005. During my taping, a girl in the crowd whispered the answer to a question very loudly. He kind of ignored it, but during the next commercial break he just sauntered over right to the section the girl was sitting in, gave them a little death stare, and just pulled his finger across his throat making the SHHTKK sound. He was extra nice to my mom, who has a crutch and brace from childhood polio. When I won the tourney, they normally had friends and family come join the winner, but he went up in the stands and celebrated with them there, so she wouldn't have to navigate the steps. And finally, I very coincidentally ran into Sean Connery at the hotel while I was in town to film the 2003 talk as it was Oscars week. I told Alex he loves those skits, and he just lit up and told me if I saw him again to pop him in the mouth and tell him that's from Trebek. My mom died of brain cancer 6 years ago. She was a huge Jeopardy fan. Near the end she couldn't think straight and was panicky and frustrated. The sound of Alex Trebek's voice was the only thing that would calm her down. I'm eternally grateful to him for comforting my mother when nobody else could. Rip Mr. Trebek. I always think about Jeopardy because it was usually on during dinner growing up. It gave me a sense of comfort because we never fought and my parents never yelled during that time. Every once in a while I would get an answer my parents didn't know and they would look at me impressed. I know this isn't the sort of moment you were asking for, but it's the fun memory I have associated with it. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was on Celebrity Jeopardy and got an answer wrong. The next person also got it wrong and Karim said, well, technically that could be right, and the judges said he was right. It was a very cool moment. When "Shoot that basketball star" Ewing, Robert Ewing, corrected Alex during Celebrity Jeopardy. The question was largest Nordic nation, I think. First two respondents, including Ewing, were wrong. Third gets the right answer before Ewing says, "That's actually incorrect, Alex. If you include Greenland, then Denmark was the greatest land area." Only time I saw Alex stunned. My dad and I would always watch Jeopardy and have a cup of coffee together after work and school. It's my favorite tradition that we have. With 4 kids in my family, it feels so nice to have one thing that's just us to share. During the teachers tournament this year, one of the teachers got the daily double. Alex said he could name his bet or make it a true daily double, and one of the other teachers loudly stage whispered, "Do it." Still makes me laugh. My grandfather was a trivia genius. He must have had a near perfect memory considering all the random stuff he never forgot. He passed when I was young and lived out of state for the last few years of his life, so I wasn't exactly close to him, but he was a bright spot in a very dark family tree. Jeopardy was a staple in his life. He would watch it religiously and just sit there answering every question. One of my favorite stories about him is of the time when my grandmother and aunt taped an episode and memorized all the answers before he could see it, and when he watched it they jumped in and answered before he could. This was the guy who would wander past a game of Trivial Pursuit and ruin it for everyone else. So I love to think of him thrown off, even just a little, when it seemed like he could never be wrong. Even though I never really watched it myself, just thinking about the show warms my heart with memories that seem so far away. And thinking of it now, I bet he's what inspired my love for holding on to random bits of information. As a kid, my great aunt and uncle's house was my second home. I'd eat dinner there at least 2x/week, and just watching the show with them was my favorite. My parents never let us watch TV while eating dinner, so being at my aunt's was a special treat. We'd watch the 6 o'clock local news, then Wheel of Fortune, then Jeopardy. That's not one memory, I know, but it's what the show means to me. In the 80s, in the Navy in Charleston, rumored was in Norfolk or Groton for training. Talking on the phone one evening and Jeopardy was on. We were watching different broadcasts of the same recorded episode. Mine was a few seconds earlier than his. He was on the payphone in the barracks TV lounge. I started feeding him answers. He was nonchalantly answering every question before the player did, to the amazement of the other dudes in the lounge. It was fun for a while. Okay, I guess. Reverse wherever I typed answer and question. They had a question about Mesopotamian cryptograms the exact same day we learned the vocabulary word cuneiform in social studies. Got the $1,000 question right in 5th grade. My folks thought I was a goddamn genius for a second. I used to play Jeopardy with my mom as a kid. We would get out paper and keep score, and I value that time we spent together. Anytime I'm visiting, my mom and I will still sit down and play. Jeopardy is the reason that I joined the quiz bowl team in high school, and we actually won the state championship one year. It was so much fun. I tried out for Jeopardy twice, and I didn't make the cut. It has always been a life goal of mine to make it on the show. I'm deeply saddened by the loss of Alex. A friend and I in undergrad had badly matching schedules, and the only times we had to see each other were 7:30 from Monthurs, which was when Jeopardy was on. So as often as we can, we would head over and watch this. Sometime back in 2005-ish. One week, there was the most elusive of contestants, the Jeopardy hottie. So beautiful. So rare. His name was Ben Bishop. He was so fine. After watching him continue through the week as clever as he was brilliant, my friend had bracelets made that said WWBBD, and I still have mine. That's my favorite Jeopardy moment. 3. They expedited the audition process for a woman with advanced cancer whose dying wish was to be on the show. She made it several episodes, but died shortly before they aired. She got to see them in advance, I believe. As a Canadian, I always enjoyed the little smirk he would have if someone got an obvious question about Canada wrong. Made me proud every time. Scene Connery. It looks like this is my lucky day. I'll take the rapists for 200. Trebek. That's therapists, not the rapists. Me and one of my foster families had the luck of being in an audience for Jeopardy one time. He talked with the audience during the breaks, and he was a really nice dude. That was the best foster family that I've stayed with so far. I grew up watching Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune every night. One year when I was very young, for April Fool's Day, the shows traded hosts. For some reason tiny me thought that was the funniest damn thing in the world and I'll never forget it. I was 12, watching Jeopardy at my grandmother's house. I was pulled out of school in the 2nd grade. I read every book I could get my hands on as a result of the lack of input. In those days I had a choice, books or boredom. 1986. I was watching an episode and realized I was answering questions with full confidence. I realized I wasn't dumb. I returned to school my freshman year of high school, graduated early. I always stayed a fan. My aunt babysitting me. She'd make ham sandwiches and we'd eat in front of the TV and watch Jeopardy. Just like Price is Right reminds me of watching it with my grandma. When I was in college my brother was my roommate. We never missed Jeopardy and competing against each other. We even had clickers to determine who clicked in first. Many an argument was had. I was 6. My grandparents had picked me up from school because dad was running late. Grandma has made pork chops, salad, and a gratin potatoes. She set up a TV tray and let me sit in her recliner while grandpa sat in his, and they turned on Jeopardy. I got so excited because they asked a question about some book I liked, and I got the question right. Grandma looked at me with her kind, approving smile. Grandpa laughed and called me a whippersnapper. Anytime my dad was running late I'd get to watch Jeopardy with my grandparents. They both passed over the last 5 years, so watching Mr. Trebek always made me feel like they were still here. I never met Alex Trebek and have no right to cry over his passing, but I've shed more than a few tears for him today. A couple that haven't been mentioned yet. When contestant Stephanie just got answer wrong, or right, I can't remember, and she flirtatiously said you are the devil. Alex Trebek. Contestant Arthur Chu. What a name. And his crazy aggressive style. During one of the interviews, he said his girlfriend writes novels. Alex was like, what kind of novels? And she was like, she writes stories about talking dogs and the ancient Near East. I was eating dinner with my brother and we just looked at each other and cracked up like who the F***ck are these people? Earlier this year they had maybe a teen tournament or a college tournament, and there was this girl with the highest pitched voice you've ever heard. She didn't talk, she squeaked. It was just bizarre and my husband and I cracked up every time she talked. When the question was something about what is the name of a gardening tool that also refers to an immoral person, and Ken Jennings answered what is a hoe. Was around age 9, boarding a plane to La with my family for vacation, when I spotted him waiting at our gate. Trying to be clever and cool in the presence of TV royalty, I casually sauntered over and said what is hello, Mr. Trebek? He looked up from his newspaper, gave a friendly smirk, and said very good young one, hope to see you on my show. I melted right there, went back to my family, and used the interaction as a basis for my what I did on vacation essay. It also served as my 2 truths and a lie story for many years. I have only ever played from our couch, but I will forever treasure the encouragement that small statement provided from my idol. Godspeed Alex. Thank you for years of fond memories and brain building. He always took pains to pronounce the Carnegie and Carnegie Mellon in the proper Scottish manner. I don't even do that as an alum, but deeply appreciate when someone else does. When they did the college Jeopardy recordings they came to my hometown. I was able to make it to the taping and be an audience member. I was like 10 years old at the time and found it fascinating to see it in real life. A teacher of mine in high school was quite full of herself and to her credit, made it on Jeopardy. Then she did so poorly she ended double Jeopardy in the negative and did not proceed to final Jeopardy. Not like she was an idiot. You're at the mercy of the categories, competitor skill, etc. But NGL was skill kind of satisfying to watch. There's a story that was shared on here about watching the show. A guy would watch Jeopardy at work in the break room. One of his coworkers, a black man, was watching too and told him that he applied to be on Jeopardy. He believed that he had a good chance since there hadn't been a black person on in a while. A few days later the guy was in the break room watching Jeopardy and there were 2 black contestants on the show. The next time he saw his coworker he stopped and asked him, "Hey, did you see Jeopardy the other day?" The coworker says no. "Why?" He says there were 2 black guys on it. The coworker looks confused and just keeps walking. It was then that the original guy realizes it was a different black coworker he was talking to. I laughed for hours. Honestly, just playing along with my grandmother. She would keep tabs on our points, and if I won I got a special treat. I learned a lot from that. I stopped watching after she passed in '96. It just wasn't the same. Every day in college, my 3 roommates and I would watch Jeopardy. We would all have to answer the final Jeopardy question, and whoever got it wrong would have to do the dishes. If no one won, they would sit another day until someone had to do them. A rule we had was if you were anywhere near the house, you had to play. Well, one day, I was walking home from school, noticed the time, and slowed a bit, so I wouldn't have to play. I get to the yard, and my roommates throw open the door and yell, "You are playing, what's your answer?" The dishes haven't been done in over a week, and it was a mess in the kitchen. So knowing I had to play at that point, I said their first thing that popped into my head, the War of 1812. Of course, this ended up being the correct answer, and I got the enjoyment of seeing them clean that mess. Less about what happened on the show, but what happened while I watched it. A few years ago my mother was in at-home hospice care dying of lung cancer. She was doing it at my grandma's, and I was staying with them to help out. Every night for the few days it lasted we watched Jeopardy together. My mom wasn't dumb by any means, but she wasn't good at trivia. So it was mainly just me and grandma calling out answers, but she was happy just spending the time with us. I don't remember the prompt, but the question answer thing was, "What is a didgeridoo?" I call it out, and my mother gives me a puzzled look, like I was speaking in tongues. The contestant calls out the same thing and Alex confirmed it was correct. My mother burst out laughing, because the gibberish I spewed was actually the answer. It was the last big laugh I ever had from her, and I treasure the memory. So I will always be thankful of Jeopardy for giving me that. A couple of years ago, I was in somewhat of a bad way, you could say. I've struggled with my mental health ever since I was young, and I've always resisted getting help for it, but eventually it got so bad, I managed to go from functional to all aboard the crazy train in the space of about 3 months, that I went to the doctor. I got a diagnosis of OCD, which surprised literally no one who knows me, and I was given a prescription for sertraline, with instructions to check back in 2 months, to get a repeat prescription, if everything was going well. Well, it didn't. I spent the first week or 2 in what I have been told is best politely described as grave intestinal distress, which was bad enough that I wanted to quit the pills then and there, but the brain fog that came afterwards was significantly worse. For 2 months, I couldn't think straight. In truth, I couldn't think about anything. It was like someone had taken my brain into the shop to fix some sort of mysterious rattling noise and I'd been given a courtesy brain that didn't work properly. I'd break off mid-sentence because I couldn't find the word I was looking for. I'd try and explain things and I wouldn't be able to form them into any sort of a cohesive order. I'd work on a story and I'd find myself saying the same thing in 3 different ways because I straight up forgot that I'd already written it a couple of lines earlier. In short, I didn't feel like myself, and I didn't know what to do about it. And that's when I found Jeopardy. In the UK, and Jeopardy isn't really a thing here. I was passingly aware of it through things like Saturday Night Live, but I'd never actually sat down and watched an episode until it appeared on Netflix, expecting it to just be something I could have on in the background while I ate dinner. I wasn't in the mood for anything narrative. I couldn't focus on anything more than the most basic plot, but I also didn't feel like sitting in silence in an empty house and eating a dinner for one either. Well, I could remember trivia. I could answer the questions. I couldn't think straight, but I at least still knew things. There was some deep part of my brain where the old me was lurking, under the drugs and the OCD and whatever the hell else was going on with me. I was in there. I found that comforting in a way that not a lot did when I felt like I was losing myself, maybe irrevocably. Look, I'm not saying that Jeopardy saved me or anything, but it was a tremendous comfort at a very dark time in my life. It helped me claw me back to something approaching normality, and I'll always be grateful to Alex Trebek for that.